everything that can be connected, anything that can be connected will be connected. Okay, what they didn't tell you is that you can be connected. That's what they didn't tell you. They didn't tell you that your body can be connected. That's the part they didn't tell you. It's the science behind electromagnetism. Your body can be connected.
Well, you heard that. Your body can be connected, and then they can actually remotely control you. So that means if you become a person of interest, they can control you. They can just switch you off. Just like you're watching the movies.
When you get into studies of electromagnetism and you look at how simple it is for you to actually stop certain connected points from having maybe an energy surge of some sort. Remember, this is the same technology that is actually used on EMPs, which are electronic magnetic pulses. What they do is, for example, anything that is connected to electricity, if it's dropped here, let's say here, where we are, anything that is actually connected to electricity will shut down. It's almost like you're killing everything connected on electricity. It goes offline. And then imagine if they can connect a person and you still have the same kind of frequencies, you still have the same kind of technology that can actually be used to say, switch this point off. That means they can actually switch off. In fact, they can actually kill you by reason of saying, we don't want him. Can you just switch him off the life support? Because it's almost like you're now on life support when you look at it. And it's amazing how people are buying into the idea because they like fast internet.
They do like fast internet. I mean, listen, it's always good to have life made easier, you know, by every means or every way. It's always nice to know that life can be made easier through innovation and technology. However, like we keep saying, that there are repercussions to it. And right now, the world is experiencing it. 5G. We started off with 2G, we went to 3G. I think we're currently even in 4G right now in South Africa. I know they've been advertising the use of 4G. Now 5G has just come and with so much bad news, but you now have a clear idea of what this can do, what it means for you to carry 5G, what it means to have it so easy in your life, you know, with this whole COVID-19. But remember, Pastor said this is just a shadow. It's not only COVID-19 that can be part of the repercussions. There can be many other COVIDs. Maybe COVID-20 to COVID-21, COVID-20.
And remember, this is just one point that they're actually using in a very big maze or matrix to actually try and force people to accept this structure or infrastructure. If you look at it, you essentially have some people who are calling for things like, for example, universal basic healthcare, right? Universal basic income. And things like, okay, global governance. When you hear them speaking about global governance and accountabilities and the SDGs from United Nations, at the end of it, there's only one matrix. There's only one point, which is the NWO, the New World Order. And what they'll be doing is at a certain point in time, the people will be living under them. For example, you can have an ocean which will not be able to actually go and fish because they will tell you about global climate change and tell you about, and the end of it is they control your production and your consumption of anything. They control your land use. They control your oceans in terms of what you can do in the ocean. They also control what you can do as a government to an extent where, for example, if they say we are pushing for the human cause, if they tell you that the human cause is being affected, let's say by something like a phantom thing like global climate change, then that means you have to actually take certain resources that are supposed to be key, maybe for development, and you have to put them towards the things that they'll be telling you. That means another government is actually in operation, not the one that would have actually voted for.
Yeah, that's it. Wow. All right, so now let's take a look. Earlier on in the program, we actually spoke about how African countries were reacting to this. What was the reason or the target of Africa being, you know, the guinea pig to test out the vaccinations in actual fact? So we put up something together for you. We've been speaking to quite a lot of people because we just want to try and understand. Do they understand themselves what this means? Well, a lot of confusion in actual fact. Some people don't even understand what it is. Some people have not even heard about it in actual fact. They have not even heard. We are asking questions and they're like, hell, what? What is it? But we just want to try and understand if the people in Africa know where this is leading to, they understand the times, or what is the story? Unfortunately, not everybody is understanding it. But anyway, every year, more than 10 million children in low and middle income countries die before they reach their 5th birthdays. Most die because they do not access effective interventions that will combat common and preventable childhood illnesses. One infant immunization is considered essential for improving infant and child survival. And the enemy is using this as a chance to further establish his sinister plans for humanity. Pastor touched on how certain powers who are behind the COVID-19 destruction are the same people who have been behind depopulating the African continent. This has been going on for many years as Africa always seeks out donations. And these donations have come in many forms, including childhood immunization. Children in Africa have long been subjected to. By 2014, 77% of the continent's children were immunized.
The population of Africa is set to almost double by 2050, raising fears that progress in fighting poverty and disease will be reversed. So, what can be done to ensure that poverty doesn't increase? And how can a disproportionately large youth population help drive progress? With me to discuss all of this and more is Bill Gates. Bill, are we at a turning point where regression is a real risk?
Well, first, the progress over the last several decades has been pretty amazing, both reducing childhood death, getting kids in school, getting agricultural productivity up, and reducing extreme poverty. But it's really Africa that still has a doubling in population to 2050 and probably another doubling to 2100, where you really have to do a good job if you're trying to get these extreme poverty rates down. So if we don't do better in investing in human capital in Africa, yes, the number of people in extreme poverty is actually going to go up.
Should the solution, or should more solutions be focused on slowing that growth? So, for example, increasing reproductive rights for women or spreading the access to contraceptives, because it seems that, is it correct that no amount of investment can really keep pace with that population growth?
What we do between now and 2050 with education, with economic growth, with health and nutrition, that'll really set the course for moderating the population growth between 2050 and 2100. But it's really a virtuous cycle, letting women have reproductive health tools that they want, educating girls, raising agricultural productivity, getting these malnutrition interventions on a much greater scale than we have today. Those are the things you would want to do anyway. It turns out that by doing those well, you also set the population growth rate coming down quite a bit. And so it just makes it that much more imperative that we invest in the human capital now, and so that the challenge of what under any scenario will be fairly high population growth, that you're able to benefit from all those young people making a big contribution to their country.
So is the fact that Africa has such a high proportion of youth population and within the context of this predicted growth, is that something that you think is a sort of optimistic statistic? I mean, is it a good thing that there's an opportunity here to sort of harness the power of those young people?
It's both an opportunity and a challenge, because the capacity to run the health systems well, to get the education system to have not only high attendance, but good learning outcomes as well. That's not going to be easy. If we don't make these investments, that youth bulge, will be a huge challenge, because they won't have the development, they won't have the economic opportunity that they deserve. So it's potentially an asset, but if we don't invest right, it could even be a liability.
Let's talk about digital technology for a minute. We know that more people than ever before are connected, more people than ever before have bank accounts. Those are both positives. But what would you say are the biggest opportunities in digital technology in terms of fighting poverty and disease?
Yeah, digital innovation is really pervasive. And so whether it's tracking, do you have the vaccines out where they should be, getting feedback from citizens, as the teachers.
By those things.
Wow. Okay, so that was Bill Gates there, talking about his plan. In actual fact, what he's doing is letting us in on his plan. Yeah. Do you see what he's doing? He comes out and does all the stats and all the math
almost like what Herman did to essentially build a guillotine that is in the public place and say,
Yes.
we are going to hang them here.
Yeah.
That's it. So he does all the math, and then he comes up with the solution. Africa is good. Let me tell you what he really said in this population problem and poverty.
Yeah.
So they're trying to control poverty. In fact, that lady even goes on to say, so how do we control the poverty Dantum line in Africa? Poverty is not controlled by depopulating. I actually didn't think so. Yes, there could be some population control of some sort, not depopulating the existing population, but you can control, right, the population growth given already the existing numbers. But is it
in any
done
case,
by
you don't even...
depopulating the existing one?
I don't think, especially when you're looking at Africa, because remember, there's same advantages that Africa has, which is why you hear many people saying Africa is the next China. It's essentially, it's labor. The population boom that we have. If you look at it, a country like Italy right now is actually going into recession because they have older people who are essentially becoming a burden to the banking system. That means your pensions funds that you're supposed to be getting, there are not enough people to actually contribute to that public purse for you to run at a general level. Forget the fact that they didn't actually invest wisely when it comes to their money. And then Africa is about to move away from that, and they don't want people to actually know that if Africa, with the rate at which they are actually trying to have everybody educated, the rate at which we will actually have the next industries, and then you compound that with the minerals that we have, that means industries can move the same way they moved from America to China to Africa. Because they're getting closer to the resources. They don't have to actually have them cross over the oceans. If the African leaders, particularly the business people, become smart enough to actually advocate for good trade terms, that means the industries will move from where they are right now located to where, number one, you're going to be paying people a lower wage because it's not competitive. People just want a source of income.
Yes,
and then the next thing, you also have the natural resources, the raw materials that you're supposed to be using close to where you have an industry. And I think that's why I have never believed anything. As an economist, I can safely say that. I've never believed anyone who says Africa is poor, because in economics, how you measure GDP, essentially you start from the goods that you have and the value addition that you can actually do. And looking at the minerals that we have, if you look at any country that you can look at and ask them, what minerals do you have? You essentially see that they're not poor.
How do you minimize poverty in Africa? Because that was one of the points that he raised there, to minimize poverty and control population.
It's very simple. Poverty is a mindset, obviously. So you start there. So what he's talking about, educating, ramping up education and ensuring that your population is actually educated and has received proper information that actually empowers them. Because one of the issues that have been raised, particularly by African leaders, is the idea of having a population that is actually going to start jobs on the continent, create people that push an education that is going to push people to actually start industries, and industries that are going to be operating here on the African continent so that they can start exporting. So the first thing that you're going to do to reduce poverty is to actually educate people, make sure that they've got the right information.
Did he talk about education? He didn't talk about education.
He's talking about giving women vaccines so that they can reduce
poverty.
Exactly, as a way of reducing the number of people that they're going to, the number of children that they're going to be bearing. So it's part of actually population control too, like what he's talking about.
It's population control without any reduction of poverty.
Anyway?
Do you get what I'm saying?
Remember, you had China that had a one-child policy. Today, they're even paying families to say, can you have 2 children at least? And they're even pushing single women to say, why are you still single? Can you get married so that you can give us more labor for you to actually effect it?
But my argument is that while he's saying poverty control, he's talking about poverty control depopulating without any empowerment of then enriching themselves. That is where the problem is with what Bill Gates is saying.
Sure.
And I don't think that African countries are really understanding this or listening to what this man is actually saying. Meanwhile, the red flags are everywhere. If you listen to everything that he's saying, all I see is red flags going up. And he's saying it in a way as though he's trying to help humanity, he's trying to help Africa. Meanwhile, he's just trying to roll out his
we also need to work
vaccinating
Remember,
plan.
the same strategy has been used before. We're speaking about anthrax and foot and mouth, which was used to actually quell down the guerrilla wars that were actually happening, because they knew that there is power in numbers. And then the next thing that they did was come up with divide and rule, essentially separate the guerrillas, the people who would have actually armed themselves for the liberation struggle for their country, for independence. These are people who are fighting for political independence. And then they separate them from the masses so that you don't have food, you don't have water, you don't have access to other things that you might actually get from your own people. And when you look at it, beyond that, we essentially had people like King Leopold who essentially exterminated the whole population. It was not necessarily because he was more interested in the idea of a national park for his own conquest. It was also because he knew when I reduce the numbers, I can actually just go and speak to a few of them who are actually left and say, look, you're outnumbered here. If we're to send our army, it can actually take you in a day or so. And I think we need to be smart enough to realize that we also have power in numbers. It's important.
There's power in numbers, and I totally agree with you. So now here's another question. Do African countries actually understand the system of lockdown, or are they just locking down without even doing any research? A question that our dear man of God actually posed in the program. Do they understand? Have they done research, or they're just locking down because President Trump locked down, and then President Cyril Ramaphosa followed, and then many other African countries followed, but do they understand the dynamics of a lockdown? So millions enter into lockdown in Nigeria, Zimbabwe, as Africa steps up virus fight. More than 20 million Nigerians on Monday went into lockdown in sub-Saharan Africa's biggest city, Lagos, and the capital, Abuja, as the continent steps up efforts to curb the spread of the coronavirus. But is the continent really ready for the effects of lockdown? Do they even understand what this means and what this can do to them? Have a look.
The city of Lagos had already closed schools and non-food shops, but many were surprised when President Muhammadu Buhari announced a 2-week total lockdown for Lagos and Abuja starting Monday evening.
We're not fully prepared because the economy situation in Nigeria is not really good. It's very poor. Things are more costly than before. We only have enough food stuff at home to take care of the family. The 2 weeks is too long.
Many Nigerians said they were less worried about coronavirus and more about how they could buy food for 2 weeks when they often have to rely on daily earnings to survive.
They invite us to sit at home. They have to provide what we're going to need for us. As we are inside the house, no food for us. You see many people at the house and no money to buy nothing for them. No store food. We don't have anything to eat at our house.
Social distancing will not be easy to implement. On average, there are nearly 5 people in every Nigerian household, compared to 2.5, for example, in South Korea. Many Nigerians said Buhari's announcement lacked clarity. He banned all movement, but said food shops would remain open. He did not say if ordinary citizens would be allowed to go to these shops during the next.
All right, so there we go. That's what is happening right there. They don't quite understand what is happening, but maybe it would be important that Africa actually discusses if they are going to lock down, what would this mean?
Sure.
How would they now tackle it
remember,
as Africa?
You have an Africa that needs to be aware of agitators for certain agendas that have nothing to do with Africa. And in this case, I'm not happy and I'm not pleased that they only followed what WHO actually gave them. Why? Because you essentially have research institutions that are there, and then you also have got your medical professionals that I think operate at the high standards that you can actually have. And then you have research that has actually come from the rest of the world to say you can actually affect. For example, South Korea is a clear example of how you can actually deal without necessarily affecting a shutdown, especially when you want your economy to continue trading. Yeah. And I think that's one of the key things that cities like Lagos, South Africa, Johannesburg, because this is a metro city which houses economic activity for the rest of SADC. And then the same is true for when you look at Lagos. I think at the end of the day, it was unthought. Well,
yeah.
I don't, because even if you look at the other countries, like the first world countries, they had food being rolled out in the different places that were under lockdown. They had measures in place that their people would not really feel the pinch. Will Africa be able to actually do that? For example, a country like a Lagos and a Zimbabwe, would they be able to do that? A country like Malawi, would they be able to actually send food to their people?
Clean water to their people, and then they want to lock them down. It's a health hazard on its own. Remember,
I think so too.
These are countries that have gone, under tempest because of cholera. Just a simple problem like that, which has been decimated in other parts of the world. And now they are saying people should live in those squalid conditions, locked down for 21 days, with economies that are essentially above 85% in terms of informal trading and informal economic activity. That means you are shutting down everybody else in terms of food, in terms of money. At the end of the day, you are essentially saying people should actually go and die in their homes for during those 21 days. I think it was never thought very, very well in terms of what effect will it bring to Africa. They just accepted to say, okay, everybody is locking down the airspace. Lock it.
Oh, wow. Interesting. But you know what? Thank God for this beautiful week that we had. Now, in our closing note today, the man of God wrapped up the first week of Your Love World We remember the time where he admonished us to take our salvation seriously. On that note, Apostle Paul, writing to the Ephesian church, said in one verse actually, that therefore he says, awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall shine, make day dawn upon you and give you light. Look carefully then how you walk. Live purposefully and worthily and accurately, not as the unwise and witless, but as wise, sensible, intelligent people, making the very most of the time, buying up each opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore don't be vague and thoughtless and foolish, but understanding and firmly grasping what the will of the Lord is in your life. The man of God announced that we will continue with fasting and prayer on Monday. And wow, I look forward to that. I'm sure it's going to be another full week. It's going to be another beautiful full week of knowledge and wisdom as led by the Holy Spirit. Aren't we just blessed? Aren't we just blessed?
Oh, yes.
And remember, Sunday, it is the communion service with our dear man of God. Be prepared for it. We will all be, hooked in from our different places, but don't miss it. Don't miss it. I'm sure Pastor has something beautiful for us there again during Communion Sunday. So, wow. All right, on that note, we have to love you and say our goodbyes. Thank you so much for being with us throughout this whole week. We have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and thank you for joining in the conversation. But it's goodbye. Right?
It is.
It's goodbye?
It's goodbye.
It's
At least
goodbye.
for now.
For now, that is. For now. We'll see you again sometime next week. God bless you.
If you've never received salvation, if you've never received Christ into your heart, if you've never experienced this life of Christ that I'm talking to you about, this is your moment. Say these words. Say, oh Lord God, I believe in Jesus Christ, the Son of God. I believe He died